Good afternoon, and you're listening to the Mt Mee Radio Kids on 101.5 FM. Currently, the weather in the region is mostly sunny with a temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. We can expect a maximum of 28 degrees today, dropping to a minimum of 18 degrees tonight. Stay tuned to Moreton Bay's very own radio station over the next hour, as we'll be bringing the latest community announcements, Mt Mee State School news, some interesting facts, Kids Speak, and an interview with today's guest, Mrs. Fiona Patterson, historian and parent from Mt Mee State School. But first, to kick off our show, we have some Bruno Mars. The time is now 12:50. Hold on. The time is now 1 p.m.
Welcome back to 101.5. You're with Brody and the kids from Mt Mee State School. Today we are very fortunate to be joined by Mrs. Fiona Patterson, a history buff who recently completed a Masters of Philosophy at University of Queensland. Welcome, Mrs. Patterson, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to talk about my research with you.
Women felt their duty was to do their bit during World War I. What were some of the types of women who took on while the men were serving in the military overseas?
It's an interesting thing to talk about the jobs that women did during the war, and because when it comes to what happened in Australia during World War I, the answer is that not many women took over men's jobs, in fact. When we think about World War I, we often think back to those grainy old photos of young women working in munitions factories or driving buses or carrying coal. But those photos were taken in Britain or France or Germany, not in Australia. Because Australia was a long way from the war front, the ammunition, the uniforms and all the things that armies need, they weren't made here. They were made overseas. And Australia didn't experience the labour shortages that they did in Europe. So the jobs that men left tend to be taken over by other men, either younger men or older men. And certainly the women had to do a lot more work because the men weren't here, take on more responsibilities, but nowhere like they had to in Australia during World War II. So my research has shown me that in Australia, patriotic women mostly found themselves doing work to support the troops. They knitted socks, they made pyjamas, they prepared boxes of comforts with things like lollies, Anzac biscuits, books, writing paper, soap, cigarettes and clothes for the men who were fighting. Apparently, I only discovered this in my research, very important fact, apparently the army only gave the soldiers 2 pairs of socks, and the food was also pretty ordinary, so they relied on what they received from Australia. The women also raised incredible amounts of money, especially for the work of the Red Cross. And although the Red Cross had men in many of the leadership roles, it was really the women who ran it. And they provided a lot of the equipment and the other things that went towards the army hospitals. And in Australia they ran a large number of convalescent homes for soldiers too. But we can't forget the over 2,000 Australian women who served overseas as nurses. And they really were at the front of the fighting quite often.
Well, that was very interesting. How did World War I change the way women thought about their place in society?
I think that for patriotic Australian women, and they're the women that I was studying, and they're the women who supported the war, for them it reinforced that they were citizens just as much as men. Women in Australia had the right to vote in federal elections since 1902, and they often described themselves as citizen mothers. This fitted well with the idea that of men as citizen soldiers. The men of the new nation of Australia saw it as their role to protect and defend the nation, and the women saw it as their role to be the mothers of the nation. Before the war, women were really very active as citizens, and they believed that women had a special role to play in society. So during the war, they believed that they should act out their citizenship by supporting the war in their own womanly way, which was through the patriotic work like I was just speaking about. Also by encouraging men to enlist and by raising strong and healthy children to be the new citizens. In Britain, for example, women didn't have the vote prior to the war, And the work that they did during the war, they used that as a kind of proof of their value as citizens and an argument to receive the vote. And they did. After the war, gradually different groups of women were allowed to vote in their elections. Some historians believe that Australian women didn't really take advantage of or capitalise on the big effort that they put in during the war in the same way that British women did. But I believe that the situation here was very different. They didn't have to prove that they were citizens. They already had the vote, and they considered themselves to be equal to men in that respect.
Cool. If you could transport yourself to any time in history as a woman, which time would you choose to experience and why?
Now, my sons would tell me ancient Greece or ancient Egypt, but I'm not too sure about that. I think the early part of the 20th century, the part of this time that I studied, would really be the most interesting, because for women, they were starting to have more rights, they were starting to have more ability to work, to get out of the home and to do much more interesting things. And Australia was a really interesting country at that time. It was kind of at the forefront of a lot of really interesting things that were happening in social areas, in education and in industry. And being a mother, it was also health issues were really starting to be addressed in a much better way, and it was a lot safer to have babies.
Cool. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. After the break, we'll be continuing our interview with our special guest. But first, to take us out, would you like to introduce our next song for us?
Yes, I will. It's an oldie but a goodie. It is Brass in Pocket by The Pretenders.
Cool. Here we go.
Hi everyone, you're listening to 101.5 and the Mt Mee Kids from Mt Mee Radio Kids, and you're listening to Annabelle. And before we went to the song, we were joined by Mrs. Fiona Patterson, parent of 3 beautiful boys in Mt Mee State School, and author of thesis titled Patriotic Women Citizenship in Australia 1940 to 1980. Now, Mrs. Patterson, as a mother of 3 boys, how do you balance the needs of your family and your heavy workload?
It isn't always easy, because I think everybody wants to do the best at everything that they do, but I think being organised and enthusiastic are the best things. You have to be organised or else nothing happens. But if you're enthusiastic about things, you can really cope with a lot of stresses and strains and with a heavy workload.
Okay, well, in the beginnings of feminism, and women thought they could have it all, families, jobs, fulfilling careers. Do you think that women can have it all? Do you feel that they suffer through an increased workload of not only looking after their families but also dealing with the stresses of holding down a job or studying for a career? Do you think that it's maybe more specific workload that they should have, or?
Well, this is interesting, because this sort of thing does come out in my study as well. And the women that I studied, they were the early feminists, and they actually didn't want to have what we call it all. They wanted legal rights. They wanted to own property, to control what they did with their bodies, and to vote. And what they wanted was the right to choose, really, and we do have that now. Sometimes we think we don't have any options, but mostly we do, and we need to be honest with ourselves about what our priorities really are. And like the women I studied, I think we need to use our political power and our energy to support each other to do that.
Well, that's a really good and interesting point. Why is it important to know and understand about our past and our history, and why would knowing about the feminism before now, how would that help us in today?
I think that old saying about if we don't learn from our history, we're condemned to repeat it. I think that's really true, because it's important for us to know our history. Mm-hmm. The big history of wars and exploration and big changes in society, but also the small history about real people, and because that tells us how our society became what it is. And if we know what our society is now, we can help shape it for the future.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess that is, it makes sense. But before feminism could be heard in society, in a social sense, women held a special place with our patriarchal society, where men behaved in a certain manner, such as opening doors for women, not swearing in the presence of a woman, and paying for a meal at a restaurant. Do you think this has changed a lot, and
how do you think men have coped with the changing roles of women since the beginning of the 20th century? Do you think it's changed a lot, or do you think it's... What do you think about it?
Well, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, men and women believed that they each had their special place in society. They called it separate spheres. So men's sphere was work and politics, and women's sphere was home and the family. And the early feminists believed that the women's sphere was just as important as the men's, and they expected that they should be able to control the home and control everything to do with their children and the welfare of their children. And that's one reason why they pushed to have the vote. Now, I think that whole idea of the separate spheres has certainly changed, and rightly so, but I think that the idea of equality that we often use today is often used today just as an excuse to behave badly towards each other and to think only of ourselves. Things like men holding open a door for women, or women respectfully listening to a man's opinion, I think they say nothing about true equality, but they do say a lot about our respect for each other. And true equality, I think, will come when all of us demand that society, each person in society, treats each other with respect, and we also have the opportunity for all of us to reach our full potential.
Okay, well, so you see it as an equal quality between each of the men and women?
Yeah, I think in that sense we have legal equality now, but I think where we suffer is when we don't treat each other with respect and consider our options properly.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Patterson. We'll be right back after these sponsors, so stay tuned.
Welcome back, and you're here with the Mt Mee School Radio Kids, and today's interview guest, Mrs. Fiona Patterson. Here we go with 10 fast facts about our guest today. 1. Place of birth.
Cairns.
2. Favourite place to holiday.
Noosa or Paris.
3. Favourite colour.
Red.
4. Number of brothers and sisters.
1 of each.
5. Early riser or night owl.
Oh, a bit of both, really.
6. Favourite TV show.
Nothing that's on anymore. Either The Goodies, the old Doctor Who, or The West Wing.
7. Favourite actor.
Sean Connery as James Bond, obviously.
8. Favourite kids radio hosts.
Oh, kids from Mt Mee, of course.
9. If you could invite anyone to dinner, who would it be?
Rose Scott. She was an early feminist in Australia. She was really outspoken. She was a great conversationalist, and she really would speak her mind, apparently.
Have you ever spent an entire day in your pyjamas?
No.
Thanks for being our guest today.
Oh, that's my pleasure. It's been wonderful.
That was Mrs. Fiona Patterson, passionate historian and all-round smart lady. Coming up within the hour, we have community announcements, Mt Mee news, and a real challenge for our teacher. You're listening to 101.5 FM, bringing more to the Moreton Bay region.
Time is now 1:30. You are listening to Brody and the Mt Mee Radio Kids on 101.5. It is now time for the Mt Mee Moves on the air and community announcements. There'll be some professional bull riding on Saturday 9th of March from 7:30pm to 10:30pm. The 2013 PBR Caboolture Touring Pro Series is filled with extreme sporting entertainment live in the QSE main area. You, Me and Us Film. Congratulations on the film group from Mt Mee School for getting their video into the Big Shots competition on Melbourne on the 6th of June. The video was picked from 250 other films, so they did a really good job. Well done, guys. The Mt Mee's Got Talent. On Thursday, the 28th of March, Mt Mee State School will be holding a talent show for the kids. Each kid has practiced hard and they are very exciting. I've seen some of the acts and boy, it's going to be a ripper. I'll be in there too. That's it for today's announcements. Keep listening to your favourite station, 101.5 FM.
Well, that was an excellent song by Ricky Lee. Okay, guys, so it's now time for Are You Smarter Than Your Teacher? Of course we are.
Not. Sorry, Annabelle.
Just don't make side comments, please. Okay, every week we challenge our wonderful, glorious teacher aide. Am I getting paid to say this stuff? We just challenge her, asking her 5 topics on an unseen topic. Now, this week we made a mistake in the script, so we actually had to tell Lisa the title. So She gets. It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be a lot easier for her actually. So here we go.
What's the topic,
Well, the
Annabelle?
topic is about farming. So here we go.
Fantastic.
How are cows made to normally give birth? How are they forced to give birth?
Forced to give birth.
Yeah.
An injection.
Artificial insection. What is the most important thing in the grass that they eat?
What's the most important thing?
In the grass that they eat?
The chlorophyll.
The magnesium.
Oh, the magnesium. Oh.
What is a young cow called? A young female cow called?
A calf. A heifer calf.
Yes. Good job. Okay. What important thing needs to happen on the farm to make it productive?
Workers. Cows.
Planting, cleaning, and milking. What grass thrives throughout winter?
The grass that thrives through winter might be kikuyu.
No.
No, it might be stargrass.
Sorry.
Ryegrass.
No, it's not. No, we won't because she only gets one answer. So, you only get. How many did she get right? She got 2 right.
I got 2. Fantastic.
2 right.
Woo-hoo.
Good job. Okay. Well, that was farming, and that's the question. So, well, better luck next week, Lisa. yeah. So, keep listening to 101.5 FM as we continue to bring more to the Moreton Bay Regional Council.
Time is now 1:43 p.m. and you are with Grayson on 101.5 FM. If your day isn't going too well, don't worry, we will cheer you up with some side-splitting jokes. What do you get when you cross a chicken and a caterpillar?
What?
Drumsticks for everyone.
Oh, God.
What is a slug?
What is a slug?
A snail with a housing problem. And a few more dad jokes. What steps would you take if a bull chased you?
Sorry? Could you
What steps would you take if a bull chased you?
What steps? I don't know.
Big ones.
Oh, God.
Why is the sky so high?
Because... Well, why because?
So birds won't bump their heads. What time is it when an elephant sits on your fence?
Fixing the fence time.
Time to get a new fence. What are feathers good for?
I don't know.
Birds.
Oh. They weren't actually too bad.
Hopefully those were able to put a smile on your dial. They sure did for me. Coming up, we have some challenges for your brains and more music, more great music from the 60s to now. Stay tuned to your favourite radio station, 101.5 FM, and the kids from Mt Mee.
Hey everybody, you're back with Annabelle and the Mt Mee Radio Kids. We didn't go anywhere after that song. We are now going to give you a challenge for your brain. So here we go for today's riddle. It's a mental challenge, so please don't call up. That's what happened to us once. Okay. How can a pants pocket be empty but still have something in it? Tricky. Let's see if you can figure it out. We'll be right back after this song to give you the answer.
Welcome back. The riddle for this week was, how can a pants pocket be empty and still have something in it? And the answer is, it can have a hole in it.
It was a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to 101.5 FM for the show from the Mt Mee Radio Kids. Remember, if you have any comments or feedback, we would love to hear about it. You can contact the 101.5 FM station through the website www.1015fm.com.au or via email radio@1015fm.com.au. The Mt Mee Radio Kids will be back broadcasting next week for another exciting show. Till then, bye from Grayson,
Brody,
and Annabelle. And I just want to say one thing. If you missed it, then you can jump onto the website. I'm not sure when it's going to be, but we're going to have... You could hear the interview that we had with Mrs. Patterson. It was really interesting, and I think we all really enjoyed it. Yeah. So bye.
See you guys.
hope you guys enjoyed that Simpsons gag. I missed out on it.
Okay, see you next time.